I keep asking myself a question I never had the courage to say out loud. How much of my life do I truly choose, and how much is chosen by the internal architecture I built without noticing? This question hits me every time I lose focus, every time I tell myself tomorrow will be different, every time dopamine pulls me into its soft gravitational field. I want motivation, but I behave as if I prefer escape. I want clarity, yet I let distraction whisper its way into my day. I want learning, but laziness arrives dressed as comfort and convinces me to negotiate with my own dreams. And somewhere inside this quiet battle, two figures rise like shadows behind a flickering light. Nietzsche, with his brutal demand that I stop lying to myself, and William James, with his calm insistence that my actions sculpt the person I become. The more I observe my life, the more I see that influence isn't an external force pressing against me. It's an internal architecture I've been renovating unconsciously. For years, my habits are the beams, my impulses are the wiring, my fears the hidden pipes that leak when I least expect it. I want discipline, yet I've built hallways that lead me toward distraction. I want purpose, yet I've constructed subtle escape routes that keep me from confronting who I could be. And the strangest part is how often I call this entire structure who I am, when in truth, it's simply what I've rehearsed. But standing at this threshold, with Nietzsche demanding intensity and James whispering practicality, I feel the tension of a life waiting to be redesigned, not with inspiration, but with honesty. Not with motivation, but with structure. Not with fantasies of change, but with the raw architecture of becoming. And I haven't resolved anything, yet. The door remains open. The question remains alive. If any part of this opening touched the quiet architecture inside you, the one you rarely reveal but always feel, stay close. If something here resonates with your own, struggles with focus, dopamine, motivation, or learning, subscribe gently and walk with me through this exploration. Leave a simple, "I understand," if you felt this same internal tension. None of us rebuilds our inner world alone. Influence has always felt like weather, something that happened to me rather than something I constructed. But the older I get, the more I sense that every fragment of attention, every flicker of motivation, every wave of laziness is part of an invisible blueprint I laid down long before I questioned my own patterns. I watch myself move through the day and see how easily dopamine redirects my path. Not violently, but subtly, like a gentle stream reshaping the riverbank grain by grain. I tell myself I'm choosing, yet I follow the same grooves carved by repetition, habit, and emotional inertia. This architecture feels ancient, as if built from forgotten decisions I never realized were decisions at all. I think about how I reach for my phone without thinking, how I postpone tasks that matter, how I drift into distraction even when I crave focus. These are not accidents. They're rehearsed behaviors, woven into the walls of my life. My attention flows where the channels are deepest, and the channels deepen wherever I have passed through most often. Influence then becomes a self-fulfilling construction. I create the path, then the path creates me. But the deeper layer is even more unsettling. I often blame myself for lacking motivation when the problem is structural, not moral. My environment pulls me in certain directions. My habits support certain behaviors. My emotional defaults favor certain escapes. I call it laziness when, in truth, it is architecture. And the architecture is working exactly as designed, even if I never consciously designed it. The architecture of influence is not a castle built in a day. It is a city built brick by brick through the moments I didn't pay attention. And now, when I want to change, I'm not fighting a single impulse. I'm fighting an entire structure that supports the version of me I no longer want to be. But realizing this gives me a strange sense of power. If I built it unconsciously, I can rebuild it consciously. If dopamine shaped the shortcuts, I can shape the foundations. If attention followed the path of least resistance, I can lay down new pathways. Influence is not fate, it is construction, and construction can be rewritten. Nietzsche arrives in my mind like a storm breaking over a silent field. He doesn't knock. He doesn't soften his presence. He doesn't adjust his tone for my comfort. He forces me to confront the structure within me that I've been avoiding for years, the architecture built from excuses. He doesn't care about my reasons, my fatigue, my moments of overwhelm. He cares about the truth, the uncomfortable truth that much of what I call weakness is actually unwillingness. And this strikes me with a violent clarity I didn't expect. Nietzsche insists that my life is shaped not by what I say I want, but by what I repeatedly choose, tolerate, and permit. He challenges the stories I whisper to myself, that I'm too tired to focus, that I need motivation to act, that my laziness is a personality trait rather than a practiced pattern. He speaks to the raw animal inside me, the one that fears responsibility more than discomfort. He demands that I stop pretending I'm a victim of my impulses when in reality, I nurture them. His philosophy shatters the illusions I used to protect myself. He forces me to see that the architecture of influence becomes dangerous when it is built from avoidance rather than aspiration. And he pushes me toward something sharper, the will to power, not as dominance, but as the responsibility to shape my own structure. He urges me to stop waiting for the perfect emotional state, to stop excusing the gap between my potential and my behavior, to stop negotiating with the softer parts of myself that seek comfort over growth. This severity is hard to swallow. It burns. But beneath the burn, I feel something awakening, a sense of self-respect, a sense that my life is worth the discomfort required to build it, a sense that the architecture I allowed to shape me can be deconstructed and reforged. Nietzsche does not want me to be comfortable. He wants me to be honest, brutally honest. And that honesty becomes the blueprint for transformation. Where Nietzsche roars, William James whispers. And his whisper is powerful in a different way, like water wearing down stone with patient persistence. He teaches me that psychology is not a lightning strike. It is a slow accumulation of tiny behaviors. He tells me motivation is unreliable, but habit is faithful. He insists that action precedes emotion, that if I want to feel disciplined, I must first behave as if I am. His voice feels like gravity, steady and grounding. James reframes influence as mechanics, tiny, almost invisible mechanics shaping my days. He shows me that my brain follows the paths I dig, and that those paths become easier every time I walk them. He explains how dopamine reinforces repetition, how attention flows toward whatever I've trained it to recognize as rewarding, how laziness is not moral failure but neurological patterning. He reminds me that every time I choose an escape, I strengthen avoidance. Every time I choose effort, even briefly, I strengthen capability. He teaches me the pragmatism my soul always resisted, that change doesn't come from grand ambition but from repeated quiet action. He says that learning is built through friction, that focus grows through practice, that discipline is not identity but architecture. And suddenly, the fog around my life begins to thin. I see that motivation has never been the problem. Structure has, and structure can be constructed deliberately. James becomes the engineer of my inner world. He teaches me that rituals are scaffolding, that environment is guidance, that behavior carves identity. He tells me to start small, to act before I feel like acting, to design systems that make the right action easier than the wrong one. His influence doesn't strike, it accumulates. And in that accumulation, I begin to shift. Inside me, Nietzsche and James collide like tectonic plates grinding beneath a fragile city. One demands inner fire, the other demands inner structure. One speaks the language of transcendence, the other the language of repetition. Their philosophies produce an earthquake inside my chest, shaking the architecture I've lived inside for years. Some days I want Nietzsche's ferocity. I want to break every internal barrier, tear down every excuse, and confront my potential with a flame that burns away any trace of hesitation. Other days I want James's calm pragmatism. I want gentle routines, small steps, simple movements that stitch stability into my life. And this conflict is not a weakness, it is a source of depth. It shows me that I need both intensity and structure, both vision and practicality, both confrontation and compassion. Their collision forces me to examine the core of my identity. Am I someone who grows through fire or through repetition, through sudden awakening or through quiet construction, through existential honesty or behavioral engineering? The truth, I realize, is both. I need Nietzsche to disrupt my illusions and James to rebuild my habits. I need the storm and the scaffolding. This ideological earthquake reshapes me. It forces me to integrate brutality with gentleness, ambition with routine, desire with discipline. It makes me understand that the architecture of influence is not one blueprint. It is a hybrid of forces. And in this collision, I feel myself becoming something new. A person capable of fierce intensity and consistent commitment. A person shaped not by one philosophy, but by the friction between them. Rebuilding my inner architecture feels like returning to a place I abandoned. It requires both the severity Nietzsche demands and the structure James prescribes. It means creating a life where dopamine is not the enemy, but a resource I redirect. It means crafting rituals that anchor my attention, environments that reduce friction, habits that carry me when motivation disappears. I realize that construction begins with honesty, brutal honesty about where I've sabotaged myself. Then comes design, new routines, new constraints, new forms of accountability. Then comes reinforcement, repetition until the new architecture supports me automatically. I learn that self-discipline is less about willpower and more about engineering, that learning thrives in stability, that attention blooms in simplicity, that laziness dissolves when structure removes negotiation. I begin building walls made of choices rather than impulses. I carve windows that open toward purpose rather than distraction. I design floors sturdy enough to hold the weight of my aspirations. And slowly, imperceptibly, the person I'm becoming begins to inhabit the structure I once only imagined. If this journey felt like walking through your own inner architecture, stay close. Subscribe gently if you want to continue exploring these depths with me, and let your presence here become part of the life you're constructing. If something resonated, leave a comment. Your voice is one more beam in the structure we're learning to build together. I'm grateful you shared this moment with me.